One Michigan property manager has lost over $300,000 due to the eviction moratorium, and it's only getting worse with the extension that they just passed. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, I have an interesting article for you today, and once again, I'm going over the plight of an individual landlord who's really been suffering throughout all of the eviction moratorium. I want to get these stories out there so that you see that, hey, we're not these big, huge corporations. We're just regular people just like everybody else. But before I get into that article, go ahead, hit that like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what you want to see on this channel. I'm going to work to keep bringing you articles about this eviction moratorium and other news that's of interest to landlords. So, this article, it comes from NBC25news.com, and it says, management property owner says he lost $300,000 during the eviction moratorium. Flint, Michigan. The CDC issued a new moratorium on evictions. This new moratorium applies to areas of the country with substantial or high COVID-19 spread. As of Tuesday, Genesee County is in a moderate area, which means the moratorium does not impact them and people can be evicted. Mike Kennedy, who owns PMI Mid-Michigan, says during the moratorium, which ended on July 31st, he lost $300,000, money he says he will never see. Well, it sounds like for now, at least the county that this guy is in, he is able to keep going along with some evictions. Now, he's in a very, very small portion of the population where you can continue without an eviction moratorium in place. But that doesn't help him considering the fact that he's already lost over $300,000. And man, that's a substantial amount of money. That's enough to basically have bankrupted me or many other landlords. But, you know, he somehow has been able to hold on, and that's fortunate. Along with landlords, Kennedy says he offered help and services to people who could not pay their rent. We set up payment plans with people. We set up like we go above and beyond, way above and beyond. It's just when you're exhausted, all of that. I had no more ammunition to go to the owners and say, listen, or try, if you pay on payments and you're starting to work on, I don't care if it's $10 a month. You're starting to work on that problem. I could care less, but when that doesn't work, that's when we're in this situation, said Kennedy. His role as property manager, he works closely with both tenants and landlords and says he never wants to evict someone, but right now what he is finding is those who are facing eviction do not want the help. And that's the same thing that I've been saying, okay? Basically, the people who are facing eviction at this point, they're the ones who would have been evicted were there no pandemic, okay? They're the people who always had trouble paying rent for whatever reason, okay? They aren't used to taking care of their financial obligations or whatever, but they would have faced eviction had there been a pandemic or not. Now they're just using the pandemic as an excuse for why they're not being evicted, and they've been able to stay in their properties for way longer than they normally would have. What about the landlords that their sole income comes from 25 or 30 houses, and they've got 50% of those that aren't paying because the people in the midst of this moratorium who's giving them money, who's helping them? There's a lot of people that I've talked to in the last 2 or 3 days that are absolutely so grateful that they're going to start collecting rent again in the next 2 to 3 months, said Kennedy. Yeah, and there are a lot of landlords who, this is their business, okay? It's just like the guy who owns a restaurant down the street, okay? Their business is these rental properties. So when you have an eviction moratorium in place that can cut off a huge portion of their income, there's nothing that they can do except for suffer these humongous losses, okay? And you can ridicule them or whatever, but when it comes down to it, this was caused by government regulation, okay? They did not put any sort of rental assistance into place that would pay the landlords directly. Instead, they put this convoluted system in because they were more concerned with the tenants than they were the landlords. And guess who is suffering the brunt of that now? The landlords. It's us suffering the brunt of all these bad decisions, okay? They extend this eviction moratorium. That doesn't mean that the government is suddenly paying rent. No, that means that the landlord is eating the losses. That is completely wrong. And there's a reason why I believe that it's unconstitutional, because property rights, they are all of our rights. They are the basis of the entire Constitution. And taking property rights away from a landlord and saying that you must house people, you must pay for someone else to live in this place off of your dime, it's unconstitutional. That's simply put. The state of Michigan says there is money out there for people. The Michigan State Housing Development Authority said the end of the federal eviction moratorium does not mean the end of financial assistance for renters and landlords here in Michigan. The COVID Emergency Rental Assistance Program, administered by MSHDA, has ample funds available to provide rental relief to those financially impacted by the pandemic. Eligible renters who are behind on their payments can receive up to 12 months of assistance on owed rent and up to 3 months of future rent assistance. Utilities can be covered through CERA. It's also important to note landlords can initiate the CERA application process to recoup owed rent and be made whole. We highly encourage anyone who has experienced pandemic-related financial hardship to apply for CERA today and then they provide their website. But I don't know how exactly the landlord is going to be able to obtain rental assistance if the tenant is cooperating. So in a lot of these cases, this is what the landlord is coming across. Basically, the tenant stayed in the house for months, maybe up to a year or longer, without paying rent. So the eviction moratorium was about to leave, the tenant just moves out. Okay, rather than being evicted or facing eviction, they're like, okay, I'm just leaving. They go on, they find another place to rent, and they have no problem because they don't have an eviction on their record. And then they use any money that they have to pay their new landlord. But here's the problem. The former landlord then wants to apply for rental assistance to pay all that back rent that this tenant owes them. And the tenant doesn't want to cooperate because they're like, well, I don't even live there anymore, so why do I need to apply for rental assistance for that last year? I'm in the clear. So a lot of tenants in those situations, they're not cooperating. And that means the landlord is just out of luck, according to the government, because if the tenant doesn't cooperate with the landlord in the rental assistance program, the landlord is eligible for nothing. And that's not even talking about the landlords who their tenants didn't even qualify for rental assistance because they earned too much money or they didn't meet some of the other qualifications. Those landlords just had to keep their tenants in the property and could do absolutely nothing about removing them. So yeah, this whole thing, it's a joke, okay? I am shocked and surprised that there haven't been multiple lawsuits filed. There haven't been a lot of the more conservative lawmakers coming out and immediately, just trying to get this thing shut down. But instead, I'm just reading, it's so positive that we're trying to keep these tenants in their houses. And I'm like, giving people free rent, the government taking private property away from a landlord and then giving it away to a renter for free, that's wrong. It's unconstitutional and needs to stop.